At my father's funeral, his will revealed that he left everything to my brother, that I had a secret of my own. The church smelled of lilac and old wood, that strange mixture of life and decay, of memory and silence. My black heels clicked softly against the stone floor as I walked down the aisle, every step echoing back at me like a reminder that I didn't quite belong here. Eyes followed me, darting glances filled with pity, suspicion, and in some cases, thinly veiled disapproval. That's what it had always been like for me in this family. Not celebrated, not respected, just observed. The coffin lay at the front of the altar, draped in velvet, polished so well it reflected the stained glass light. My father, Richard Halstead. A man larger than life in every way except when it came to me. To the rest of the world, he was a legend, a ruthless businessman, a respected figure, a man who built a legacy. To me, he was the man who forgot my birthdays, dismissed my achievements, and looked through me as if I were a smudge on his perfect portrait of family success. My brother, Matthew, stood near the front row, his hand clasping my mother's arm, as though he were the grieving son of the century. His jaw was tight, his hair perfectly combed, his black suit tailored to perfection. He looked every bit the heir, the golden child, the one my father had groomed for greatness since the moment he could walk at me. I was the shadow at the edge of the frame. The priest's voice droned on, words about legacy, about family, about a man's immeasurable impact. I tuned it out. Instead, my gaze lingered on the coffin. I thought about the last conversation I had with my father. 3 weeks before his heart gave out, he had looked me in the eye during dinner and said, "You'll never understand what it takes to carry a name, Claire. You're too soft. That's why Matthew will inherit everything. He's the only one capable." The only one capable. That night, I had gone home, poured myself a glass of wine, and cried until dawn. Not because of the inheritance. I never cared about his money. I had built my own career, my own independence. No, I cried because in 32 years of being his daughter, he had never once told me I was enough. Now, as the coffin sat before me, I didn't feel grief. I felt something else, something sharper. A quiet, simmering fire that had been building for years, and it was about to find air. When the priest finished, my mother dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief and leaned into Matthew. She hadn't looked at me once. That was fine. I didn't expect her to. She, too, had played her part in my erasure, always fussing over Matthew's triumphs, always overlooking my existence. She wore pearls today, the same ones father had given her on their 40th anniversary. I wondered if she ever realized how much she looked like an actress in a role, always performing the grieving matriarch, always rehearsed, never real. After the service, the family lawyer announced that the reading of the will would take place at the Hallstatt estate. My stomach tightened. I already knew what was coming. The empire, the money, the properties, the legacy, all of it would go to Matthew. Father had practically said as much. Still I went. Not because I wanted anything, but because I had something of my own. Something they didn't know about. Something father never realized. The drive back to the estate was a blur of wet pavement and gray skies. When I pulled up the long gravel driveway, the mansion loomed ahead, tall and severe, just as it had always been. I hated that house. Every brick of it was soaked with memories of my invisibility. Christmas mornings where Matthew unwrapped car keys and vacations while I got sweaters. Dinners where my accomplishments were mentioned in passing before the conversation. Return to Matthew's latest success. Birthdays where my seat was empty because they had forgotten me again. Inside, the air was heavy with perfume and polished wood. Relatives I barely knew gathered in the sitting room, murmuring condolences to one another, their eyes flicking toward Matthew like bees to honey. No one even asked how I was holding up. I might as well have been a guest in my own family. Lawyer Mr. Klein cleared his throat as he spread papers across the oak table. His voice was steady, professional, but it sliced through me all the same. I, Richard Halstead, being of sound mind. The words tumbled on legal jargon, formalities. My pulse quickened as he reached the division of assets. To my beloved son Matthew Halstead, it went exactly as expected. The company shares, the estate, the offshore accounts, the vehicles, the art, the investments. Every line of the will was a coronation for Matthew. My brother sat tall, composed, but I caught the faintest curl of a smile at the edge of his lips. And to my daughter, Claire Halstead, Mr. Klein paused, glancing at me with something that might have been pity. I leave the sum of $5,000 to be used as she sees fit. 5,000 out of millions, out of everything. A tip for existing. A consolation prize. The room was silent for a moment before the whispers began. Cousins shifting uncomfortably, an aunt clearing her throat, eyes darting toward me with a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. My mother wouldn't even look at me. Matthew kept his gaze straight ahead, his expression carefully neutral, but I saw it, the flicker of satisfaction, the knowledge that he had won. I sat still. My face gave nothing away, but inside the fire roared. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I held a secret, one that could burn this carefully crafted legacy to the ground. The whispers died down as Mr. Klein folded the papers back into his briefcase. The sound of the brass clasps clicking shut seemed to seal my fate, or so they thought. Chairs scraped back. Relatives shuffled to their feet, gathering coats and purses, already moving on to conversations about dinner plans, travel, the weather. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the arms of the chair, nails digging into polished mahogany. $5,000. That was what 32 years of being Richard Halstead's daughter was worth. Not love, not recognition. The token amount that wouldn't even cover a semester of Matthew's Ivy League tuition. My mother finally turned toward me. Her face was carefully composed, her eyes shimmering with what she probably thought looked like sorrow. But I had lived under her gaze long enough to know it wasn't sorrow. It was relief. Relief that the will was done, the fight was avoided, that her golden boy had gotten everything, and I had been neatly swept aside. Claire, she said softly, almost sweetly, don't take this personally. You know how much your father admired Matthew's capabilities. That word again. The one that always meant I was lacking. I smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. Of course, Mother. I wouldn't dream of taking it personally. Her shoulders relaxed, as if she believed me. That was always their mistake. Matthew crossed the room to me, his hand brushing my shoulder in mock sympathy. I'm sorry, Claire. Really? You know how Father was? It wasn't about you. It was about the future of the family name. The family name. The legacy. The same lines I'd heard my entire life. Used to justify why I was always an afterthought. I looked up at him, at his perfect jawline, his expensive suit, his air of effortless superiority. Congratulations, Matthew, I said calmly. You must be proud. He hesitated, searching my face for bitterness. I gave him none. Only composure. That was the part he never understood, the quiet, steady patience of the overlooked. He mistook it for weakness, but I had learned to play a long game. When I finally left the estate, the air outside was cool, the kind of Christmas that bites at your lungs and makes you feel more alive than you want to admit. I stood at the edge of the driveway, looking back at the house. The windows glowed golden against the gray sky, warm and inviting, but I knew better. That house had never been warm to me. It was a fortress built for Matthew's triumphs and my invisibility. I unlocked my car, slipped into the driver's seat, and sat there for a long time. My phone buzzed, messages from coworkers, friends, one from Jennifer, my closest confidant. How did it go? I didn't answer. Not yet, because how could I explain what they didn't know? My father had always believed Matthew was the only one capable of carrying on his legacy. He thought I was too soft, too emotional, too invisible. He thought I had no power, no leverage, no secrets, but he was wrong. The truth was, I knew things. I had evidence, documents, memories turned into records. Proof of the empire my father built on foundations not nearly as solid as everyone believed. Proof that could tear Matthew's inheritance apart piece by piece if I chose to let it breathe. I wasn't sure how long I could keep it buried. That night, I went back to my apartment, a space so carefully decorated it almost looked staged. Clean lines, muted tones, the kind of place you build when you've lived too long with chaos. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my desk, pulling out a small fireproof lockbox from the bottom drawer. The key trembled in my hand as I unlocked it. Inside were folders, letters, flash drives, copies of things I wasn't supposed to have. I traced a finger over the top file. Halstead Corporation, offshore accounts. The documents detailed transfers, millions of dollars funneled quietly into accounts in places most people couldn't pronounce. Accounts not listed in the will. Accounts my father had always hidden. Beneath that was a flash drive. Inside it, emails. Emails between my father and Matthew, planning moves that would undermine competitors, ruin partnerships, crush people who had once trusted them. My brother wasn't innocent. He wasn't the golden child.